I'm not going to get over it. They played very well. Devin White's played very well. And people know I haven't been high on that signing. And I hope you see my objectivity here because he's played very well.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Football Friday edition of Birds 365. Good stuff all around. A good initial reaction from Johnny Mack. Key takeaways, I could call it, from Johnny Mack down at day two of open OTAs to the media. Not day two overall. Day 5, I believe, was yesterday, and then they'll have day 6 today. John, let's get a report in, not so much reaction and observations. Who was in attendance yesterday, or I guess a better question would be who was not in attendance, and anybody that was an eye-opener to you? Last week we had Keely Ringo. I know some of the older guys are going to miss. You mentioned James Bradbury and Slay were gone, but just who didn't make it to yesterday, and then an update on the injuries as well.
It was all veterans who were not there, so no, nothing eye-opening. Lane Johnson, I mentioned, Slay, Bradbury, CJ, so most of the secondary. Josh Sweat hasn't been there for either of the open practices. So when they did have that 11-man period, it was Bryce Hupp on the right side, which would typically be Josh, and Brandon Graham on the left side, which would typically, I assume, be Huff. And inside it was Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Milton Williams. So no surprises there. So that was it from the guys who were missing, all the veteran guys. So no concerns there. Two notable injuries. I mentioned Nakobe returned, which was a little bit of a surprise. I thought they'd be cautious. They held him out of team drills last week, but he was back working a little bit. He was rotating on the second team with Ben Van Sumeren, next door, and Burks. So, just dipping the toes in the pool. But I think it's notable that they kept Devin White and Zack Baun as the first team. And I think that was pretty notable. And Ananias Smith, who's working his way back from a stress fracture they found at the scouting combine, looks ready. I think he wants to be out there. He's got his helmet. He's stretching, and all of a sudden he doesn't do anything in individuals or teamwork. They did let him return a punt. The punt returners were Britton Covey, Cooper DeJean, Isaiah Rogers, and then Ananias Smith. They let him return a punt, and he muffed it, unfortunately, for Ananias. And he did some push-ups, so he punished himself. I think he was just so excited to be out there. But not a great first impression. But he hasn't been working in team drills yet, so not quite ready. And then Jacob Harrison, to a lesser extent, he was probably the best of the second-tier wide receivers in the first OTA practice. He's a big guy, 6'5", runs sub 4.4, has some NFL experience, mostly as a special teams player. But he was out. He was watching practice, so can't be too serious, but he was out. The Eagles don't have to report injuries, so they're not going to tell us what the injury is. Knowing him, and he's a fast guy, it's probably soft tissue.
Yeah. Hamstring or something.
Yeah. And then Eli Ricks, who got hurt early last week and wasn't in the teamwork, was back, and he was working with the second team, but then he left again. So he's still dealing with something, I think. But he was back and he was practicing some. So those are sort of the injury notes that I have.
Yeah, so Sidney Brown's still out. Nakobe Dean's starting to get some reps.
Yes, Sidney's out.
He's not practicing told. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not doing. He's got a torn ACL, so that's a 9-month injury. He's going to be out for most of training camp too, but he should be ready to go. His goal is week 1, but at the bare minimum, very early in the season. But he's not going to have much of an off season. That thing needs time to heal, even though he looks like he could play. Oh, I should mention Zach McPherson.
Wow. That's a name we haven't heard in a little bit.
Yeah. Zach's such a good guy. It's very difficult. The numbers, we constantly talk about the numbers. He's back at practice, but he's not getting reps, which is obviously not a good sign. Coming off an Achilles, and he was on the sidelines. He was engaged. He had his helmet on. He probably worked in the developmental period after practice. We get kind of shuttled off quickly, but he's not getting reps with the first group of corner, which is not a good sign. But he is back from the torn Achilles, at least.
Yeah, so we'll see if he makes a team. Johnny Mac, we're going to do a little bit of offense and a little bit of defense. But before we do that, I do want to go to the rookies. Let's talk about the rookies. Quinyon Mitchell, everybody's waiting to see how he is. How did he look? Cooper DeJean was lined up in the slot on the second team again. Anais Smith, at least he got to go out there and touch the ball. What maybe wasn't a great touch after a drop. But how did the rookies look? And then a Jeremiah Trotter Jr. update at that linebacker. So anything you saw that stood out to you from the rookies?
Yeah, I thought Quinyon really didn't no splash things, no noticeable, but nothing bad either. So that's always good when you have
That's
a
a good thing at
cornerback,
right? Yeah.
So not a lot of balls went his way, but yeah, still on the second team. As Ringo was back, and they went with Ringo and Rogers to start, and then Cooper, as you mentioned, he had reps inside and outside again, which is a good sign because it's a clear indication that Vic believes he can handle a bunch of stuff. And at one point, he was nickel one play, and he was outside on the next play, which is again a good indication from my perspective. He had a one slot play. Britton Covey, who's by the way done a really good job in his reps as a slot receiver, tends to get very good separation. But Cooper locked him down at one point and got a PBU on a quick out route option route where Britton went outside. DeJean got his hands on the football. So Cooper's doing well, and I would say both are doing well.
No reps at safety though for Cooper, right? Because a lot of people are still floating that out there that they think he could be a safety. Nothing at safety.
No, nothing at safety. Avonte Maddox was the starter at safety with Reed Blankenship, and the backups were Tristan McCullum and Mekhi Gardner. And then he went down to Andre Sam and who am I missing? I'll try to but no, he's not taken one rep at safety to this point that we've seen. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen somewhere down the road when it becomes more 11 on 11. I think you're going to see him, as I said, in the big nickel at times. So whatever you want to call that, as a third safety, an extra linebacker, right. It's sort of depends on labeling. It doesn't matter really how you want to label it, but his versatility is there. But he's not played traditional safety. For people that think he's not going to be in the conversation to be a starting safety. If people think that the Eagles scouted him as an outside cornerback, believe ultimately he's going to be an outside cornerback, but believe he has the versatility to play a bunch of different positions.
Yeah, so we'll see how it all shakes out with them. So good stuff from the rookies. Did you see anything from Trotter or no?
13. Middle linebacker, so nothing, which is fine. As I mentioned, it went Devin White or Zack Baun. Second team was N'Kobe or Ben Van Sumeren and Oren Burks, and Jeremiah is on the third team with Brandon Smith. So they're starting them off slowly. Nothing wrong with that, and he'll probably get some second team reps. Not probably, definitely in training camp, maybe even by mini camp. But yeah. If anybody thinks he's going to be a day one starter, you're probably going to be disappointed.
John, let's move into the offense. I want to talk offense. Let's start with Jalen Hurts, but I'm excited to talk about the wide receiver 3 after hearing and reading some stuff, especially from Ed Kratz, your buddy at Sports Illustrated, wrote some good overreactions. So I will preface it with that. They are overreactions, but still good stuff from him nonetheless. But let's start with Jalen Hurts and the whole quarterback room. Kenny Pickett took a little bit of a step backwards yesterday compared to his red hot OTA number 1 in front of you guys. Is that correct? And then just what you saw from Jalen.
Yeah, the quarterbacks were not good, and it was it was a room, the entire room. They all contributed. They all had interceptions. Jalen had 2, should have had 3. I mentioned Ringo dropped 1.
Yeah, that was to Paris Campbell, by the way.
Yeah, and tremendous coverage by Ringo. No shot on the throw, and he just dropped the interception. So wasn't a great throw, not a great performance. Kenny was probably even worse. So for those who the underthrow, the one thing Kenny Pickett can really's got the back shoulder down well.
Yeah.
He is really good on back shoulder throws, but I don't know if you can run an entire offense around back shoulder throws. But he had 2 nice back shoulder throws that were pinpoint. The problem was the other stuff. And then Tanner McKee just had bad practice. That's the worst practice I've ever seen.
Yeah, I'm a little interested in what you said about him in the open about his mechanics. Like, is Doug Nussmeier messing with them that much? That
I don't know. I don't know. But
because that's not something you want to hear if a quarterback coach is working on your mechanics and you're a second-year pro.
He just looked. I've seen him enough now where he looked totally different throwing motion than what he typically has. So maybe he just had a bad day, and that's part of the thing. Mechanics are a big thing with young quarterbacks because
absolutely. Jalen Hurts had that. Jalen Hurts needed to work.
Carson Wentz had it as well. And the thing is, it's sort of like the baseball analogy. I'll go Jim Schwartz. If you see a pitcher, all of a sudden one day they just they're not as consistent with their motion, and everything breaks down, and hopefully that's not what's going on with Tanner McKee, but yeah.
Well, Tanner McKee is not the guy I'm worried about. Obviously, it's what's happening to him, but the reason I asked the question is because Doug Nussmeier is going to be coaching Jalen Hurts and Kenny Pickett too. So if what he's doing
I'm not ready to throw Kellen and Doug under the bus, but
no, I don't either.
It isn't. All you can do is talk about what you saw, and the offense was bad. I mean, 4 interceptions that should have been 5 in a passing
from the offense
in a passing camp. I think people don't understand. These things are geared towards the offense being successful.
Right.
Chip Kelly used to talk about the ball never hits the ground, and Chip, a bunch of coaches, when Sam Bradford, ball never hits the ground when Sam Bradford's here in 7-on-7s because he's so accurate and all that kind of stuff. But he was, but 7-on-7 isn't football. And Sam had tons of injury issues, obviously, but it is designed. I bring that up because it's easy for the offense. Well, it ain't. It hasn't been easy, and that's not a good sign. You should be dominating 7-on-7s, and they're not. And there's no way you should be throwing 4 interceptions in a passing camp in a modern NFL. And there they were throwing them, and it
And
should have been
by the way,
5.
they're throwing them to a lot of young guys. Now it's not like Darius Slay's out there picking on them. This is Ringo. It's Isaiah Rodgers, a guy who hasn't played football in over a year. That could be a little concerning. I don't want to overreact to it,
well,
but
I
based
kind
on the
of
way you're explaining it, it looks like the offense has been pretty putrid.
it has it has been pretty putrid, but again, the offensive line isn't out there for the most part. That's the strength of this
Defensive
team.
line isn't out there either, though, and that's who I look at as the strength of the defense.
Well, that's true as well. And hey, it's a good sign. You look at it both ways: glass half full, glass half empty. The corners have looked a lot better than they have been, and that's a good thing.
Okay, well, let's do an exercise real quick. If you had a pick, I'm going to force you to pick one way or the other. Is it more that the offense is playing poorly or that the defense is exceeding expectation and playing very well and causing turnovers?
Offense. Yeah, I mean,
easy answer for John.
I mean, part of it. A lot of it is Devontae's not there. I mean, we've talked about it over the past week a lot. They fall off a cliff after AJ and Devontae at wide receiver. So you're throwing the ball to Joseph Nada and Paris Campbell, which is not a strength. But while I say that, you had a chance to throw a touchdown to Dallas Goedert, and it's off target. You had a chance to throw a long touchdown that would have excited people to John Ross on day one with John Ross being here, and they underthrew it by 8-10 yards. That's not the defense. That's John Ross was behind the defense. They just underthrew it. Mekhi Gardner intercepted it. So from your question, yeah, it's more the offense is not sharp. And that's typically the way it goes in every NFL city. The defense is ahead of the offense early.
Yeah.
So that part of it's not that rare or unique. And then you are learning a new offense, and there seems to be a lot of uncertainty. That's another thing. When you're in 7-on-7s and the ball doesn't come out, and a ball doesn't come out way too much with the Eagles quarterbacks, which means they're overthinking things.
Yeah, which I mean, we had BLG on Wednesday. He talked about that a lot with Jalen Hurts processing and getting the ball
and it's
out.
not it's not just Jalen either. It's everybody.
Yeah, but I'm the guy most focused on.
Well,
Jalen.
yeah.
So if he's holding on to the ball in 7-on-7s, I mean, that's not great.
No, but he's always held on to the ball. He's gonna, as Brandon mentioned, he's gonna hold on to the ball, because that's part of his game. But yeah, on 7-on-7s, you want to see it come out because you also have to understand what the drills are and what they're trying to accomplish. And that's another thing from the impact of, sometimes you are going to throw passes in practices that maybe you wouldn't throw in a game because you're trying to test it.
Yeah, it's like me at the par 3 course the other day. I was playing, doing a little punch and run. I'm like, I got to practice on it here because I'm not going to do it on the course.
Yeah, exactly. And then go back to the baseball stuff and Jim Schwartz. I mean, you see good pitchers get destroyed in spring training a lot because they're working on something new.
Right.
And they're trying to maybe add a curveball, maybe add a changeup to their mix, and they use it down there. And everybody's like, whoa, so-and-so got rocked. It doesn't matter. So that factors into it as well. So I try to give as much context as possible, and I'm not concerned about the offense at all, but I'm also not going to lie to you and say, hey, they're doing well. They're
Yeah.
not doing well. They're struggling trying to learn a new offense, which
Yeah,
is not a
so
bad thing.
not looking good, but no reason to be overly concerned about it right now. John, any sign of the RPO out there? Daz brings up a good point. Holding onto the ball is a tough thing. You know, when Jalen was in that RPO and quick read offense, he was getting that ball out much quicker. Any sign of that out there?
No, it's a passing game. No, but no, the running game is not even involved.
Yeah, I didn't know
Not
if they
even
would at least
involved.
line it up, even if the defense knows the pass
No.
is coming, just to
Yeah.
practice the.
It's not, I mean, it's not even involved at this stage, which is part of it all as well. I mean,
Right.
you have no threat. The defense has no threat of a running game. They know a pass is coming. So um, that's another big part of it. It becomes a lot more difficult when you have that RPO game involved and you have to worry about stopping the run and you have to worry about Saquon Barkley. Um, yeah. And Saquon not involved at all. Um, so, you know, I don't
Not much from Saquon yesterday, other than the fact that he looks pretty good in Eagle Green, and everybody's excited
Oh, he
about
looks
that.
good.
Yeah,
He's the get off the bus guy first. Um, yeah, he looks good, you know.
it's not everything, but at least he does look good. I guess. I guess, right?
Well,
John, let's
he
talk.
always has. Nobody
Yeah,
would ever say Saquon doesn't look good.
yeah, he's built and he's looks good in Eagle Green. And I saw the video you tossed me of Jalen throwing it to him from the backfield, so everybody gets excited at that stuff. Me as well. I'm guilty of it as well. Johnny Mac, let's talk wide receiver 3. Apparently, Paris Campbell's looking decent. John Ross looking decent. They seem to be, is the philosophy here, John Ross and Paris Campbell together make up the speed you lose with Quez Watkins?
Well, I had to chuckle.
Is that what we're going for, John?
I mean, John Ross is, he's a 4.22 guy. So I don't know what he runs now. Maybe he can't run a 4.22 today, but he did mention that he thinks he can run at
Fast?
that level more consistently than when he was younger. Um, and he did get behind the defense at one time. He does look like he's still got juice from a speed perspective. And right now he's got an opportunity because they don't have anything awe-inspiring behind AJ and Devontae, to say the least. So it'll be interesting. I still think somewhere they're going to add another more proven receiver somewhere down the road, and maybe go in a different direction. But we'll see how that shakes out. With Paris, he's mentioned, he talked yesterday as well. He's got a long history with not only Nick Sirianni, but Kevin Patullo and Jason Michael and Aaron Moorhead, guys who were in Indianapolis when he was drafted there. So he's got familiarity from that standpoint. And he's a guy who looks like an NFL receiver, but it hasn't really manifested itself over 5 seasons. So it's hard for me to think that the switch is going to go on in year number 6. I do think he's not going to embarrass you out there. I think he's going to make catches when the ball comes his way. And he would be the heavy favorite to be the third receiver, I would say, still right
Yeah,
now,
it seems like
unless they
Hurts
add
likes him
somebody
too,
else.
right? A lot of targets to him from Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, well, right now he's the wide receiver too. Now that's what you don't want to happen. If you can imagine
Yeah.
all of a sudden, and you kind of saw it with Quez. I mean, when Quez had to be the wide receiver too, it wasn't great. And it probably wouldn't be great if Paris Campbell had to be the wide receiver too.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it definitely wouldn't be great if Paris Campbell had to be the wide receiver too. Let's move into, we talked tight ends already earlier today. I know EJ Jenkins made some good plays Alberto still fighting for the roster spot. Solid practice yesterday by all reports. John, let's talk defense. We'll start back on Isaiah Rodgers because we have a lot of new listeners now compared to, when we started the show. It's the Isaiah Rodgers show. Johnny Mac's MVP has been dealt, and it's been dealt to Isaiah Rodgers for the 2 OTAs here on May 31st. The number one football award of May has been dealt, and Isaiah Rodgers gets it. What have you seen from him? What have you seen from the other young guys? And how do you think the cornerback position is going to fall? I got to say, this has become the one thing I'm most focused on because I think there's some really tough decisions here for Howie if these guys are all playing so good. What are they going to do, and how did it look yesterday?
Well, my biggest concern with Isaiah Rodgers, as I said, his time in Indianapolis, he proved he can play, proved he was an NFL player. But anytime you're off for over a year, you worry about rust, and he hasn't been rusty at all. Again, we have to see when he gets the pads on how physical he could be. He's going to be an outside. He's undersized as an outside corner. So we talked about that. I mean, he's 5'10", 170 is what he's listed at. And he proved he could play outside at a pretty solid level with limited snaps with the Colts. And maybe he would have gotten exposed a little bit, trying to see what the Eagles list him as if they give him a little bit of heft. They got him at 5'10", 176. So that's not – it doesn't project great in run support. So I think that's going to be a key part of Isaiah Rodgers to see how he handles things when the pads come on and things get a little bit more physical. He can obviously run. We talked about some of the speed with Paris Campbell and John Ross, especially. He ran a sub 4.3 at his pro day. So he's a very fast guy. So, he has the athleticism. And right now he's proven that he's in the conversation to be the default setting at corner, outside corner, if Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean aren't ready week 1 and they need more of a ramp up period. To me, he'd be the guy opposite Darius Slay because I do not believe James Bradbury is going to be here, to say the least. So I think he would be that next guy. And that's a good safety net. That's a good safety net to have a veteran guy who's proven at the bare minimum that he can handle the position at the NFL level.
Yeah, so good stuff there from Isaiah. Good stuff there from the rest of the cornerbacks. We'll see how it all shakes out. There's a lot of decisions to be made for Howie Roseman there. So we'll see what he ends up doing and how he plays his cards on that. John, I want to talk about Zack Baun a little bit more, the linebacker. He's apparently had some pretty good showings in OTAs. A lot of talk from Vic Fangio about him. Do you think he can be a guy that can legitimately be a starting linebacker on this team?
Yeah, more and more, I think. Vic said, I think he can play off-ball linebacker, and he's seen nothing to dissuade him from that thought. And I would agree with that very early. He's mainly played on the edge when he got an opportunity to play on defense with the Saints, which is a very good defense. And he didn't play a lot on defense, but they have good linebackers. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The Eagles targeted him early in free agency because he thought he was potentially one of those guys who was blocked by a deep position in New Orleans, and maybe there was more to him. But the disconnect was interesting because Howie talked about him like he would be a flat defender, an edge guy. And then Vic showed up and said, no, he's going to be an off-ball linebacker. Now, is that because he doesn't have other options, or is that because he really likes him? I think that's the question on Zack Baun. I'm not going to get over. They played very well. Devin White's played very well, and people know I haven't been high on that signing. And I hope you see my objectivity here because he's played very well. But I'm still not going to sit here and say that that's going to be a strength of the Eagles defense. I can't see that at this stage.
Yeah, so we'll see what they end up doing there. John, before I want to talk to you about the press conferences a little bit more and just get some of the takeaways on that. But I saw some tidbits from Brandon Lee Gowton on Bleeding Green Nation about Jalix Hunt, Johnny looked comfortable in coverage, Johnny Wilson, Tyrion Davis Price fumbled last week and dropped a pass yesterday, so not good. Just any other things that stood out to you in the practice, maybe that we missed and didn't hit on yet? I mentioned.
Well, I would say, yeah, BLG's right. Ty Davis Price did not have a good practice. Really difficult time catching the football, and that's not his purview. I've said pretty consistently, especially when you have Saquon Barkley, Kenny Gainwell, Will Shipley. Those are your three guys that you know are going to make the team. I would like to have a more of a north-south runner. I talk about it consistently.
Right.
And that's what Ty Davis Price is supposed to be. That's what Kendall Milton's supposed to be. That's what Lou Nichols is supposed to be. So if they keep a fourth running back, and they will, whether it's on maybe not on the 53, but they will on the practice squad. So those guys are fighting for that role. And you got to be able to catch it a little bit. So I thought he took a big step back. Milton caught it a little bit better. And I will say Will Shipley had a really difficult first practice, and he was much better in the second practice. But Will's going to make the team. I mean, he just had a bad day in the first OTA. He was much better in the second OTA, catching the football. Yeah, but not a lot of great splash plays. I'm trying to think of the splash plays on offense, and it's difficult, and it's mainly back shoulder stuff. As I said, EJ had the EJ Jenkins. Most people think of EJ Smith from the Inquirer.
Yeah, that's what I thought of at
Jenkins. EJ Jenkins has done a good job, and he made some plays. Alberto made some plays. Not much from the receivers. Boy, not much at all from the receivers, which is not a good sign when you're not getting the football outside to the receivers in a passing camp.
Yeah.
But again, I think that had more to do with the quarterbacks. John Ross was open at one point. Dallas was open. More of it outside corner route in the end zone. Jalen just missed him. So not a lot of good to talk about for the offense.
Yeah, which isn't ideal to be honest. We're about 15 minutes away from Chris Franklin joining us. He was also down at OTAs yesterday. So we'll get his takeaways, his reaction, what he thinks of some of the stuff. But Johnny Mac and I are going to take a break now. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit of the press conferences, any more final takeaways, and then we'll also look ahead real quick and just give you the rundown on what the schedule is next week. Next week, things get fun, and then we have a little bit of a lull period after that until training camp. But we do have mini camp next week, and that's mandatory. So we'll be able to see some more things, and John will have full access for all 3 days of that next week. So pretty exciting going into the weekend here on a Football Friday. Pretty exciting weekend. With an exciting week of Eagles football coming up. Just 98 days, Johnny Mac. Jalen Carter amount of days away from
we got to start doing the jersey countdown. Well done, Xander.
Yeah, so Jalen Carter days away from the Eagles opener versus the Green Bay Packers in Sao Paulo, Brazil. An interesting opening, one we haven't had ever here in Philly. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, we got to get the Bryce Huff Day. That's a zero. We got to get the game day.
Yeah, we'll be talking about Bryce Huff Day on that's a Friday game, so we will have a Birds 365 that day.
Yeah.
Mark it on the calendar already, everybody. If you're in the chat, you better be here for Bryce Huff Day, which is September. What is it? The 6th?
6th, yeah.
September 6th. So 98 days away from now will be Bryce Huff Day on Birds 365, and we'll preview the Eagles opening game, which will be a very fun time. It's tough for me to even think about that right now. We're far away from it, but it is coming up. So stay tuned, everybody, on Birds 365. We'll be right back. Chris Franklin coming up next in hour number 2.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.